Vincent Coleman thought the tiny holes in his bedroom wall were just settling cracks in his 40-year-old house. The 67-year-old retired engineer had been living alone since his wife Linda died, and small maintenance issues seemed normal. But when he decided to investigate with a flashlight, he discovered his neighbor Derek had been watching him through strategically drilled spy holes for 3 years. This is the story of how a methodical aerospace engineer used his technical expertise to expose a voyeuristic neighbor's surveillance system and send him to prison for invasion of privacy. By the time Vincent was finished, Derek Morrison faced federal charges, and Vincent had uncovered a neighborhood-wide spying operation. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. You'll want to hear every detail of how Vincent turned his engineering skills against the creep who violated his privacy. Vincent Coleman had lived in his Riverside, California home for 23 years, ever since accepting a senior engineering position at a local aerospace company. The house was a modest ranch style with thick walls and mature landscaping that provided privacy from the neighboring properties. After his wife Linda died from cancer 2 years earlier, Vincent had become increasingly reclusive. At 67, he was financially comfortable with $2.4 million in retirement savings, patent royalties from his aerospace innovations, and a paid-off house worth $800,000. More importantly, he valued his solitude and privacy during his grieving process. The house next door had been rental property for years, with a rotating cast of tenants who rarely stayed longer than 12 months. Vincent preferred it that way. Less chance of developing complicated neighbor relationships that required social energy he didn't have. In early 2021, Derek Morrison moved into the rental house. Derek was 42, recently unemployed from a tech company, and seemed friendly enough during their initial introductions. "Mr. Coleman, I'm Derek. Just moved in next door," Derek had said over the fence one March afternoon. "I work in tech, so I'm home a lot. If you ever need anything, just holler." "Appreciate that," Vincent replied politely. "I'm retired, so I keep pretty quiet hours." "Perfect. I'm sure we'll get along great." Over the first few months, Derek seemed like an ideal neighbor. He kept his yard maintained, didn't throw parties, and occasionally offered to help with small tasks around Vincent's property. "Mr. Coleman, I noticed your gutters need cleaning," Derek would say. "I've got a ladder if you want to borrow it." "That's thoughtful, Derek, but I can handle it." "No problem, just being neighborly." Vincent appreciated the offers but preferred handling his own maintenance. As an engineer, he enjoyed the problem-solving aspects of home repair and liked maintaining his independence. What Vincent didn't realize was that Derek's helpfulness masked a more sinister interest in his daily routine. By summer 2021, Vincent began noticing that Derek seemed unusually informed about his personal habits. During casual conversations over the fence, Derek would make comments that felt oddly specific. "You were up late last night, Mr. Coleman," Derek mentioned one morning. "Saw your bedroom light on past midnight." "Just reading," Vincent replied, though he wondered how Derek could see his bedroom window from his own property. "Good book. You seemed restless. Heard you moving around quite a bit." Vincent found this concerning. His bedroom was on the side of the house facing Derek's property, but the windows had blinds, and the houses were separated by a 6-foot fence. How could Derek know so much about his nighttime activities? A few weeks later, Derek made another unsettling comment. "Hope you're feeling better, Mr. Coleman. Noticed you were having trouble sleeping Tuesday night." "I slept fine Tuesday night." "Really? Could have sworn I heard you up around 2 a.m. Maybe it was the TV." Vincent hadn't been awake at 2 a.m. on Tuesday, and he definitely hadn't been watching television, but Derek seemed certain about these details. The comments continued over the following months, each one revealing knowledge that Derek shouldn't have possessed. "New pajamas, Mr. Coleman? Saw you got a package from Amazon yesterday." "How did you see my package?" "Oh, just happened to be in my yard when the delivery guy came. Hope you don't mind me noticing." Vincent did mind. His front door wasn't visible from Derek's property, and Amazon deliveries were left on his covered porch. Derek would have had to deliberately position himself to observe package deliveries. But the comment that truly alarmed Vincent came in October 2021. "Mr. Coleman, you might want to see a doctor. You've been talking to yourself quite a bit lately." "Excuse me? In your bedroom at night? I can hear you through the walls sometimes. Just sounds like you're having conversations with someone who isn't there." Vincent knew exactly what Derek was referring to. Since Linda's death, he occasionally spoke to her photograph on his nightstand before going to sleep. It was a private grief ritual that he performed quietly in the sanctuary of his own bedroom. There was no way Derek should know about these personal moments unless he was somehow monitoring Vincent's bedroom activities. That night, Vincent began investigating. Vincent's aerospace engineering background had taught him to approach problems systematically. If Derek was somehow observing his bedroom activities, there had to be a technical explanation. He started by examining the exterior walls of his house that faced Derek's property. The bedroom wall showed normal signs of aging, paint fading, minor cracks, small holes that could be explained by settling or weather damage. But Vincent's trained eye noticed something unusual about several of the holes. They were perfectly round, approximately quarter-inch in diameter, and positioned at specific heights that would provide optimal viewing angles into his bedroom. Using a flashlight, Vincent examined one of the holes more closely. Instead of rough edges that would indicate natural weathering, the hole had smooth, precise cuts that suggested drilling with professional tools. This wasn't caused by settling, Vincent muttered to himself. Someone drilled this deliberately. He counted 12 holes along the bedroom wall, each positioned to provide a different viewing angle. The lowest holes would show his bed, the middle holes covered his dresser and changing area, and the highest holes provided an overview of the entire room. Vincent's engineering mind immediately understood the sophistication of the surveillance system. This wasn't random voyeurism. It was calculated, methodical, and designed to capture comprehensive coverage of his private space. But confirmation required examining the situation from Derek's side of the wall. Vincent needed access to Derek's house to verify his suspicions, but he couldn't simply ask to inspect his neighbor's bedroom. He needed a different approach. He began monitoring Derek's schedule, using the same systematic observation techniques that Derek had apparently been using on him. Derek left the house every Tuesday and Thursday morning at 9 a.m., returning around 2 p.m. The pattern suggested regular appointments or part-time work. On a Thursday in November 2021, Vincent waited until Derek left, then approached the fence line between their properties. Derek's bedroom window was visible from Vincent's yard, and Vincent could see that the interior wall facing his house had been modified. Small telescopic viewing devices were mounted at each hole location, creating a sophisticated surveillance system that could observe multiple angles of Vincent's bedroom simultaneously. Camera equipment was positioned to record the surveillance, and Vincent could see monitors displaying real-time footage of his own bedroom. Derek had transformed his bedroom into a surveillance center focused entirely on Vincent's private life. The discovery made Vincent's skin crawl. For months, possibly years, Derek had been watching his most intimate moments: grief conversations with Linda's photograph, private bathing routines, vulnerable moments of emotional breakdown. Vincent realized he needed evidence that would hold up in court. Vincent's first step was documenting the surveillance system without alerting Derek to his discovery. Using his own camera equipment, he photographed the drilled holes from inside his bedroom, measuring their dimensions and positions. Next, he installed a small inspection camera through one of the holes to capture footage of Derek's surveillance setup. The images revealed not only the viewing devices and recording equipment, but also evidence that Derek had been maintaining detailed logs of Vincent's activities. Vincent could see notebooks, timing charts, and what appeared to be edited video compilations of particularly private moments. The scope of the surveillance was far more extensive than he had imagined. But Vincent needed to understand the full extent of Derek's operation before involving law enforcement. His engineering background taught him that complex systems usually had multiple components and purposes. He began researching Derek Morrison's background and discovered troubling information. Derek had been fired from his previous tech job for, quote, inappropriate workplace behavior, and had a history of restraining orders filed by female coworkers. More concerning, Vincent found online forums where Derek had been posting about neighborhood surveillance techniques and sharing advice about monitoring interesting subjects without detection. Derek wasn't just spying on Vincent. He was part of an online community dedicated to voyeuristic surveillance of unsuspecting targets. Vincent realized he needed professional help to gather evidence that would satisfy legal requirements and ensure Derek faced appropriate consequences. He contacted a private investigator named Sarah Martinez who specialized in privacy violation cases. "Mr. Coleman, what you're describing is serious criminal behavior," Sarah explained during their first meeting. "Invasion of privacy, voyeurism, potentially harassment and stalking. But we need rock-solid evidence that will hold up in court. What kind of evidence? Video proof of the surveillance equipment, documentation of the drilling activity, evidence of recording and storage of private footage. We also need to establish the timeline and scope of the violations. Sarah helped Vincent develop a comprehensive evidence-gathering strategy that would document Derek's crimes while ensuring Vincent's safety and legal protection. Working with Sarah Martinez, Vincent designed a controlled operation to capture Derek in the act of surveillance. They installed hidden cameras in Vincent's bedroom that would record Derek's viewing activities from his side of the wall. The plan required Vincent to maintain normal routines while the surveillance equipment documented Derek's voyeuristic behavior. It was psychologically difficult for Vincent to continue his private activities, knowing he was being watched, but the evidence was crucial for prosecution. Over 2 weeks in December 2021, the hidden cameras captured extensive footage of Derek operating his surveillance system. The recordings showed Derek watching Vincent's private moments, making notes in his logbooks, and adjusting camera equipment for better viewing angles. Most damning was footage of Derek masturbating while watching Vincent's private activities, confirming the sexual nature of the surveillance. But Sarah's investigation revealed that Derek's operation was even more extensive than they had initially discovered. "Vincent, we found something else," Sarah reported after reviewing the surveillance footage. "Derek isn't just watching you, he's been selling access to the footage." Selling access? Online voyeurism websites. He's been streaming live footage of your private moments to paying subscribers. The recording equipment isn't just for his personal gratification, it's a business. Vincent felt physically sick. Not only had Derek been violating his privacy for years, but he had been monetizing that violation by selling Vincent's most intimate moments to strangers online. How many people have been watching me? Based on the subscriber data we've identified, potentially hundreds over the 3-year period. Derek was charging monthly fees for access to what he advertised as real senior male private content. The commercial aspect of Derek's crimes transformed the case from simple voyeurism to a sophisticated privacy violation enterprise. Vincent had been unknowingly performing for an online audience of paying voyeurs for 3 years. Sarah contacted federal authorities, as the interstate nature of the online streaming operation made Derek's crimes federal offenses. FBI agent Michael Chen took over the investigation after Sarah Martinez presented the evidence of Derek's interstate commercial voyeurism operation. The case fell under federal jurisdiction due to the online streaming across state lines and the commercial nature of the privacy violations. "Mr. Coleman, you've been the victim of a sophisticated criminal enterprise," Agent Chen explained. "This isn't just neighborhood voyeurism, it's commercial exploitation with federal implications." The FBI obtained warrants to search Derek's property and seize his electronic equipment. The raid was scheduled for a Wednesday morning when Derek would be home, ensuring they could arrest him immediately after securing the evidence. Vincent watched from his bedroom window as federal agents surrounded Derek's house. The raid began at 6 a.m. with agents simultaneously entering through the front and back doors. Derek's shocked reaction was captured on the surveillance equipment he had used to spy on Vincent. The irony wasn't lost on Vincent. Derek's own surveillance system documented his arrest for surveillance crimes. The FBI seized dozens of electronic devices, thousands of hours of recorded footage, and detailed logs documenting Derek's 3-year surveillance operation. They also discovered evidence of similar operations targeting other neighborhood residents. Derek Morrison has been running surveillance on at least 6 different neighbors, Agent Chen reported. "You were his primary target, but he's been spying on multiple households and streaming their private activities online." Derek had transformed the entire neighborhood into content for his voyeurism business, with Vincent as the featured performer. But the most disturbing discovery came when agents analyzed Derek's financial records. Derek's commercial voyeurism operation had generated more than $180,000 over 3 years. He had been charging subscribers $25 monthly for access to Vincent's bedroom footage, with premium tiers offering special content and custom requests. "Mr. Coleman, Derek was taking requests from paying customers," Agent Chen explained. "Subscribers could pay extra to request specific activities or angles. He was actively directing the surveillance to create custom content." Vincent realized that Derek's Helpful Neighbor Act had been designed to manipulate his routines and create more interesting content for the paying audience. The gutter cleaning offers, the package observations, even the comments about your sleep schedule, all of it was designed to gather intelligence for more effective surveillance, Agent Chen continued. Derek had been studying Vincent's habits not out of neighborly concern, but to optimize his voyeurism business. Every friendly interaction had been calculated to improve the commercial value of Vincent's privacy violations. The financial records also revealed that Derek had been planning to expand his operation. He was researching equipment for audio surveillance and had been pricing installation services for additional camera systems. Your bedroom wasn't enough. He wanted complete home surveillance. Derek's ultimate goal was transforming Vincent's entire house into a commercial voyeurism studio, with paying customers able to observe every aspect of his private life. But Derek's arrest was only the beginning of Vincent's fight for justice. Derek Morrison was charged with 15 federal counts, including invasion of privacy, commercial voyeurism, interstate transmission of private sexual content, harassment, and operating an illegal surveillance business. The prosecution, led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Lisa Rodriguez, built their case around the extensive evidence Vincent and Sarah Martinez had gathered, combined with the electronic evidence seized during the FBI raid. Derek Morrison turned his neighbor's grief and vulnerability into commercial entertainment, Rodriguez argued during opening statements. He violated the most basic expectations of privacy and dignity, transforming a widower's bedroom into a voyeurism studio for paying customers. Derek's defense attorney, James Patterson, attempted to minimize the crimes by characterizing them as neighborhood disputes and questioning the extent of harm to Vincent. "My client made poor decisions, but no physical harm occurred," Patterson argued. "This is a case of inappropriate behavior, not violent crime." But the evidence against Derek was overwhelming. The prosecution presented video footage of Derek operating surveillance equipment, financial records showing $180,000 in voyeurism income, subscriber logs documenting hundreds of paying customers, communications showing Derek taking custom requests for specific content, evidence of surveillance targeting multiple neighborhood residents. Vincent testified about the psychological impact of discovering he had been unknowingly performing for a commercial audience during his most vulnerable period of grieving. "Derek didn't just violate my privacy," Vincent told the jury. "He commercialized my grief. He sold my most private moments to strangers for entertainment. He turned my bedroom, the place where I said goodnight to my deceased wife, into a peep show." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Derek Morrison was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $340,000 in restitution to Vincent and other neighborhood victims. But Vincent's victory extended beyond criminal prosecution. Vincent filed civil lawsuits against Derek Morrison, the property management company that owned Derek's rental house, and the online platforms that had hosted and profited from the voyeurism content. The property management company settled for $850,000 after Vincent's attorneys demonstrated that they had failed to properly screen Derek despite his history of inappropriate behavior and privacy violations. Property owners have responsibility for ensuring their tenants don't commit crimes against neighboring residents, Vincent's attorney explained. The management company's negligent screening enabled Derek's criminal operation. The online platforms initially claimed immunity under Internet Service Provider protections, but Vincent's legal team successfully argued that actively facilitating and profiting from non-consensual voyeurism content made them participants in the privacy violations. 3 different voyeurism websites settled with Vincent for a combined $1.2 million and agreed to implement stronger verification procedures to prevent similar non-consensual content. Vincent Coleman's case has established important precedents for holding online platforms accountable for commercial privacy violations, legal analyst Dr. Patricia Williams explained. It demonstrates that companies can't simply claim immunity when they actively profit from criminal content. But Vincent's most important victory was the systemic changes his case inspired. Vincent's case led to comprehensive updates in California privacy laws and federal regulations governing residential surveillance. The Coleman Privacy Protection Act was passed by the California legislature, creating stronger penalties for residential voyeurism and requiring property management companies to conduct enhanced background checks on tenants. Federal authorities used Vincent's case to develop new protocols for investigating commercial voyeurism operations, and created specialized task forces to target online platforms hosting non-consensual content. Vincent Coleman's methodical approach to documenting his privacy violations created a template for investigating similar crimes, FBI Director Sarah Kim explained. His engineering background and systematic evidence gathering provided law enforcement with tools we now use nationwide. The case also prompted major internet platforms to implement new policies for identifying and removing non-consensual voyeurism content, with automated detection systems designed to prevent commercial exploitation of privacy violations. But perhaps most importantly, Vincent's story educated other potential victims about recognizing signs of residential surveillance. Vincent's exposure of Derek's neighborhood-wide surveillance operation revealed that residential voyeurism was more common than most people realized. The FBI investigation identified 12 other cases in the local area where residents had been unknowingly targeted for commercial voyeurism. Derek Morrison's operation was part of a growing trend of using residential surveillance for online content creation, explained Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a researcher who studies privacy crimes. Vincent's case exposed how sophisticated these operations can become. Vincent began speaking at community meetings and senior centers, educating elderly residents about protecting their privacy and recognizing signs of surveillance. The most important lesson from my experience is that privacy violations often start small and escalate gradually, Vincent explained during his presentations. Derek began with friendly neighborliness and slowly gathered intelligence that allowed him to target me more effectively. Vincent's educational work helped identify 3 additional residential voyeurism operations in Southern California, with victims using his documented techniques to gather evidence against their surveillors. Vincent Coleman showed other victims that they could fight back systematically and effectively, said Margaret Foster, director of the Privacy Rights Coalition. His technical approach gave people tools to document crimes that are often difficult to prove. The community response also led to neighborhood watch programs specifically focused on identifying residential surveillance and protecting vulnerable residents from privacy violations. Vincent's case attracted attention from technology companies interested in developing residential privacy protection tools. His detailed documentation of Derek's surveillance methods provided insights into how consumer privacy could be better protected. Working with several tech companies, Vincent consulted on developing smartphone apps that could detect hidden cameras, identify unusual electronic signals, and help residents monitor their own privacy security. Vincent's engineering background and direct experience with surveillance gave him unique insights into how these systems operate, explained Dr. Michael Torres, a privacy technology researcher. His input helped create tools that other potential victims can use. The Privacy Shield app, developed with Vincent's consultation, became one of the most downloaded residential security tools, helping users identify potential surveillance threats and document evidence of privacy violations. Vincent also worked with home security companies to develop new services specifically designed to protect against residential voyeurism, including electronic sweeps for hidden cameras and monitoring services that alert homeowners to unusual surveillance activity. The Vincent Coleman case changed how we think about residential privacy threats, said Lisa Martinez, CEO of Secure Home Technologies. We realized that traditional security systems weren't designed to protect against the kind of sophisticated surveillance that Derek Morrison was using. But Vincent's most important contribution was demonstrating that victims could use technology to fight back against privacy violations rather than simply accepting them as inevitable. 3 years after Derek's arrest, Vincent had transformed his experience from victimization into empowerment. At 70, he had become a nationally recognized advocate for residential privacy rights while maintaining his independence and dignity. Derek tried to turn my grief into his profit, Vincent reflected during a recent interview. But ultimately, his crimes led me to discover strength I didn't know I had and purpose I hadn't expected to find. Vincent's $2.2 million settlement recovery had been donated to establish the Coleman Foundation for Privacy Protection, which funds legal advocacy for residential surveillance victims and develops technology tools for privacy protection. I didn't need the money, Vincent explained, but other people need protection from the kind of violation I experienced. The foundation had helped more than 300 residential surveillance victims across the country, providing legal assistance, technical support, and emotional counseling for people whose privacy had been violated. Vincent's personal healing had also progressed significantly. The discovery and prosecution of Derek's crimes had given him a sense of control and purpose that helped process his grief over Linda's death. In a strange way, fighting Derek's surveillance helped me work through my feelings about Linda, Vincent said. Having to testify about our private moments forced me to articulate emotions I'd been keeping buried. Vincent had also developed meaningful relationships with other privacy violation survivors, creating a support network that extended far beyond his original isolation. Vincent showed all of us that we could be more than just victims, said Patricia Chen, a surveillance survivor who worked with the foundation. He proved that fighting back intelligently and systematically could create justice and prevent other people from experiencing similar violations. Derek Morrison remained in federal prison, his appeals having been exhausted. He would serve at least 6 more years and faced lifetime registration as a sex offender upon release. The rental house next door had been purchased by a retired couple who appreciated Vincent's privacy and maintained respectful boundaries. Vincent had never again experienced the unsettling feeling of being watched in his own home. Vincent's case had created ripple effects throughout the residential privacy protection industry and criminal justice system. Law enforcement agencies nationwide adopted the Coleman Protocol for investigating residential surveillance crimes, using Vincent's systematic documentation methods as a training template. Vincent Coleman changed how we approach privacy violation cases, explained Detective Captain Maria Rodriguez, who oversaw privacy crimes for the Los Angeles Police Department. His methodical evidence gathering showed us how to build stronger cases against surveillors. The case had also influenced federal legislation addressing commercial voyeurism. The Residential Privacy Protection Act, passed by Congress, included provisions specifically inspired by Vincent's experience, creating federal crimes for commercial exploitation of residential surveillance. Vincent's case demonstrated that existing privacy laws weren't adequate for addressing sophisticated surveillance operations, explained Senator Patricia Williams, who sponsored the federal legislation. His experience provided the foundation for stronger legal protections. Technology companies had invested millions of dollars in developing privacy protection tools based on Vincent's insights, creating an entire industry focused on residential surveillance detection and prevention. But perhaps most importantly, Vincent's story had educated thousands of people about protecting their privacy and recognizing surveillance threats. The Vincent Coleman case is studied in law schools, police academies, and privacy protection programs across the country, said Dr. Jennifer Walsh. His experience taught an entire generation of advocates how to fight privacy violations systematically and effectively. Vincent continued consulting with law enforcement agencies and testified before congressional committees about residential privacy protection, but he had also found time to pursue personal interests that had been neglected during his marriage and Derek's surveillance. "I'm finally living for myself," Vincent said during a recent interview. "Derek thought he was stealing my privacy, but ultimately he helped me discover who I could be when I stopped hiding." At 70 years old, Vincent had become one of the nation's leading experts on residential surveillance crimes and privacy protection. His technical background, combined with personal experience as a victim, gave him unique credibility in both law enforcement and privacy advocacy communities. The Coleman Foundation had grown into a national organization with offices in 12 states, providing comprehensive support for residential surveillance victims. Vincent's systematic approach to fighting privacy violations had been codified into training programs used by victim advocates nationwide. Vincent created a playbook for fighting surveillance crimes that we now use in cases across the country, explained Sarah Martinez, the private investigator who had originally helped Vincent build his case against Derek. His methodical approach gives victims concrete steps they can take to gather evidence and seek justice. Vincent's educational work had evolved to include corporate consulting, helping businesses understand how to protect employee privacy and identify potential surveillance threats in workplace environments. Companies realized that if residential surveillance could be this sophisticated, workplace privacy violations might be equally complex, Vincent explained. "My experience with Derek gave me insights into how surveillors think and operate." The privacy protection technology industry continued seeking Vincent's input on new products and services. His understanding of both surveillance techniques and victim psychology made him valuable for developing tools that were both technically effective and psychologically supportive. "Vincent understands privacy violations from the inside," said Dr. Michael Torres. He knows what victims need emotionally as well as legally, which makes him uniquely qualified to guide technology development. But Vincent's most important ongoing work remained direct support for individual surveillance victims. "Every month I get calls from people who've discovered they're being watched," Vincent said. "They feel helpless and violated, exactly like I did when I first realized what Derek was doing. Being able to give them hope and practical guidance is the most rewarding part of what I do now." Vincent had helped expose 17 additional residential surveillance operations across the country, with dozens of surveillors facing criminal prosecution based on evidence-gathering techniques he had developed. "Vincent Coleman saved my life," said Robert Kim, a 73-year-old surveillance victim from Seattle who used Vincent's methods to expose a neighbor's voyeurism operation. "Without his example, I would never have known how to fight back, or that fighting back was even possible." The network of surveillance survivors Vincent had helped create provided ongoing support and advocacy that extended far beyond individual cases. "We're not just helping victims," Vincent explained. "We're building a community of people who understand that privacy is worth fighting for and that sophisticated crimes require sophisticated responses." Today, Vincent Coleman lives peacefully in his Riverside home, protected by state-of-the-art privacy security systems and surrounded by respectful neighbors who understand boundaries. At 70, he has transformed one of the most violating experiences imaginable into a force for protecting other people's privacy and dignity. The bedroom where Derek Morrison secretly watched and recorded him for 3 years has become Vincent's home office, where he coordinates privacy protection efforts that have helped hundreds of surveillance victims across the country. The violation that was meant to exploit his vulnerability became the foundation for discovering strength he never knew he possessed. "Derek thought my age and grief made me an easy target," Vincent reflects. "He assumed I would be passive, isolated, and unlikely to fight back. But he underestimated what 40 years of engineering problem-solving had taught me about systematic investigation and methodical evidence gathering." Derek Morrison served his full 8-year sentence and was released in 2030 as a registered sex offender with lifetime restrictions on internet access and proximity to residential areas. He never successfully appealed his conviction or reduced his sentence, and multiple civil judgments continued garnishing his wages for restitution payments. The Coleman Foundation has recovered more than $12 million in settlements for residential surveillance victims and successfully lobbied for stronger privacy protection laws in 31 states. Vincent's systematic approach to fighting surveillance crimes has become the standard protocol used by law enforcement agencies nationwide. "Vincent Coleman proved that sophisticated crimes require sophisticated responses," said FBI Director Sarah Kim during the 10th anniversary commemoration of Derek's arrest. "His methodical approach gave law enforcement tools we continue using to investigate privacy violations across the country." But perhaps Vincent's greatest victory was personal, proving that violation and exploitation don't have to define a victim's future. "Derek stole 3 years of my privacy, but I've spent the last 7 years helping other people protect theirs," Vincent concluded. "He thought he was exploiting my weakness, but he actually revealed strength I didn't know I had." The story of Vincent Coleman demonstrates that age brings wisdom, experience brings problem-solving skills, and systematic thinking can defeat even sophisticated criminal operations. When faced with violation, victims don't have to accept helplessness. They can choose to fight back intelligently and create justice not just for themselves, but for others facing similar threats. Vincent's bedroom walls have been completely rebuilt, with advanced privacy protection that would detect any surveillance attempt within seconds. But more importantly, Vincent rebuilt his sense of security and purpose, transforming trauma into triumph and violation into victory. That's the engineer's greatest achievement, taking a problem that seemed unsolvable and creating a solution that protects not just himself but countless others who never should have to experience what he survived. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Remember, privacy is a right worth fighting for, and systematic thinking can overcome even the most sophisticated violations. Vincent Coleman's story represents something much larger than one man's fight against a voyeuristic neighbor. It exposes a growing epidemic of residential surveillance that law enforcement experts say is vastly underreported and increasingly sophisticated. Every week since Vincent's case became public, I receive messages from viewers sharing similar experiences. neighbors with unexplained knowledge of private activities, mysterious holes appearing in shared walls, technology workers with too much interest in their elderly neighbors' routines. The pattern is disturbingly consistent across the country. What makes Vincent's case unique isn't the severity of Derek's surveillance, it's Vincent's systematic response to it. Most residential surveillance victims never discover they're being watched, and those who do rarely have the technical expertise to document the crimes effectively. Vincent Coleman's engineering background gave him advantages most surveillance victims don't have, explains Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who researches privacy crimes. He understood how to investigate systematically, document evidence properly, and think like the criminal he was fighting. But Vincent's story teaches lessons that any potential victim can apply. The importance of trusting instincts when neighbors seem unusually informed about private activities. The value of systematic observation when something feels wrong. The power of methodical evidence gathering when facing sophisticated crimes. Consider how Derek's operation escalated over 3 years. It began with friendly neighborliness and gradually progressed to commercial exploitation. This pattern appears in residential surveillance cases nationwide. Criminals use helpfulness and concern to gather intelligence for more effective targeting. Residential surveillors almost always present themselves as helpful neighbors or concerned community members, explains FBI agent Michael Chen, who now leads the Bureau's Residential Privacy Crimes Unit. They use assistance offers to study victim routines and identify optimal surveillance opportunities. The commercial aspect of Derek's crimes represents an even more disturbing trend. Vincent wasn't just being watched, he was unknowingly performing for a paying audience. His most private moments were being sold as entertainment to hundreds of subscribers who viewed his grief and vulnerability as content. This commercialization of privacy violations has created financial incentives that make residential surveillance increasingly attractive to criminals. Instead of committing crimes for personal gratification, surveillors can generate substantial income by streaming private content to paying customers. Derek Morrison made over $180,000 exploiting one neighbor's privacy, notes Assistant U.S. Attorney Lisa Rodriguez. That kind of profit potential attracts criminals who might not otherwise engage in surveillance activities. The technology that enabled Derek's operation continues evolving rapidly. Drilling equipment has become quieter and more precise. Camera technology is smaller and higher quality. Streaming platforms make it easier to monetize private content. The tools available to residential surveillors are becoming more sophisticated every year. But the tools available to potential victims are also improving, largely thanks to insights from Vincent's case. Privacy protection apps can detect hidden cameras and unusual electronic signals. Home security systems now include specific protections against voyeuristic surveillance. Legal advocacy resources help victims navigate complex privacy violation cases. Vincent Coleman's systematic approach created a roadmap that other victims can follow, says Sarah Martinez, the private investigator who helped Vincent build his case. His methodical evidence-gathering techniques have been adapted for use by people who don't have engineering backgrounds. The legislative changes inspired by Vincent's case have strengthened privacy protections nationwide, but enforcement remains challenging. Residential surveillance crimes often involve sophisticated criminals with technical expertise, making them difficult for traditional law enforcement to investigate effectively. Privacy violations require specialized investigation techniques that many police departments aren't equipped to handle, explains Detective Captain Maria Rodriguez. Vincent's case showed us that these crimes are more complex than we initially understood. The psychological impact of residential surveillance extends far beyond the immediate privacy violations. Victims often struggle with feelings of violation, paranoia, and loss of security that can persist long after the surveillance ends. Vincent's recovery demonstrates that systematic action and community support can help victims regain control and purpose. Fighting back against Derek didn't just stop the surveillance, Vincent reflects. It gave me agency in a situation where I felt completely powerless. Taking systematic action helped me process the violation and transform it into something meaningful. The community Vincent built around privacy protection continues growing as more surveillance victims discover they're not alone in their experiences. The Coleman Foundation receives calls from people across the country who've recognized signs of residential surveillance and need guidance on fighting back effectively. Vincent proved that individual victims can create systemic change, says Margaret Foster, director of the Privacy Rights Coalition. His case demonstrated that fighting sophisticated crimes requires sophisticated responses, but those responses are achievable for people who approach the problem methodically. As technology continues evolving, the threat of residential surveillance will likely increase. But Vincent's story provides a template for fighting back that emphasizes systematic thinking, careful documentation, and the importance of seeking professional help when facing complex privacy violations. The most important lesson from Vincent Coleman's experience isn't about surveillance technology or legal strategies. It's about refusing to accept violation as inevitable and understanding that age and circumstance don't determine a person's ability to fight for their rights and dignity. Vincent transformed his bedroom from a surveillance studio back into a private sanctuary, but more importantly, he transformed himself from a victim into an advocate who has protected hundreds of other people from similar violations. That transformation demonstrates the power of systematic thinking, methodical action, and the refusal to let criminals define their victim's future. Vincent Coleman's victory belongs not just to him, but to every person who refuses to accept violation as the price of vulnerability. Remember, your privacy matters, your dignity has value, and sophisticated violations require sophisticated responses. Vincent Coleman proved that, with the right approach, even the most powerless-seeming victims can create justice and protection that extends far beyond their individual cases.